Hey, stuffers! If the Bible had an R-rated director's cut written by an ancient alien, this would be it. Alex here, and welcome back to Stuff with Alex. Before Noah, before the ark was even a blueprint, the world was ruled by giants. Literal monsters who were taught by rogue angels how to forge weapons, create chemical warfare via cosmetics, and build a civilization so morally bankrupt God had to hit the cosmic reset button. And the book that explains all this, the book that proves evil on Earth started with a celestial technology leak, was strategically erased from history. The text under scrutiny is the Book of Enoch, and the reason it's banned is the biggest cover-up in human spiritual history. The text alleges that divine beings gave humanity the blueprints for its own destruction. Following the initial shock, the setup establishes the identity of Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, the seventh patriarch from Adam. The most compelling paradox is established by noting that this text, believed to be the writings of Enoch, the seventh from Adam, as referenced in 1 Enoch chapter 60 verse 8, is actually cited by name in the New Testament's Epistle of Jude, chapter 1, verse 14 to 15. This confirms that early Christian authors were familiar with and relied upon the text, lending immense weight to its historical validity, yet it was systematically excised by the Western Church by the 4th century CE. This calculated removal frames the core conspiracy, suppressing material validated by its own tradition to reshape religious doctrine. The narrative must first address the text's provenance and the mystery of its disappearance and rediscovery. The Book of Enoch, 1 Enoch, is an ancient Jewish apocalyptic text attributed to the patriarch Enoch. It contains unique material detailing the origins of demons, the Nephilim, the fall of angels, and a prophetic view of the Messianic age. For centuries, the complete copy of the text survived exclusively through its preservation by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and the Ethiopian Jewish community Beta Israel, which maintains its canonical status. This isolated preservation prevented the text from being lost entirely after it fell out of favor in the Roman world. The text sparked a revival of interest in the 18th century, but its true antiquity was definitively established in 1947 with the discovery of Aramaic fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls near the Dead Sea. This discovery confirmed that the earlier sections of the book originated as far back as 300 to 200 BCE, validating its ancient authority. Scholarly consensus holds that 1 Enoch is a compilation of 5 distinct sections that were originally independent works, only later redacted into the form known today. The fact that the text, which was demonstrably central to certain strands of Second Temple Judaism, as evidenced by the Dead Sea Scrolls findings, was later excluded from the Christian canon, suggests that the exclusion was not an accident of history. Rather, the prevailing interpretation is that its removal was a political and theological decision to enforce doctrinal unity following the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. The content of 1 Enoch directly contradicted the simplified explanation of sin that focused exclusively on Adam and Eve's transgression, which the nascent church favored to centralize the role of the messianic figure. By eliminating this text, early religious authorities effectively performed a canonical triage, selecting content that supported their emerging structure while rejecting material that complicated the official narrative of human failure and subsequent redemption. The core narrative of Enoch 1, detailed primarily in the Book of the Watchers, chapters 1 through 36, begins with a cosmic catastrophe. This section warns of the great judgment against the Watchers, a collective of angels who chose to descend from heaven. The Watchers were led by Semjaza, and their motivation was simple. They found the women of earth beautiful and agreed to leave their heavenly positions to marry them. This was not a minor infraction. It was a fundamental breach of the divine barrier between heaven and earth. Once on earth, the Watchers' union with human women produced the Nephilim. These creatures are described as giants who were responsible for widespread havoc, eventually growing so destructive and demanding that they began literally to consume humans alive. This detail shifts the nature of the crisis from mere moral corruption to systemic biological and physical tyranny. The Nephilim's existence created a crisis of despair that went beyond standard mortal sins like theft or murder. It introduced a unique, bioengineered form of evil that humanity was incapable of combating, creating a world so chaotic that a divine reset was the only solution. The narrative establishes a clear causal relationship. The knowledge transfer, discussed in the next section, facilitated the power for evil, and the Nephilim provided the physical means of enforcing that evil through mass destruction and consumption. While the collective sin of the Watchers was the descent and defilement, the specific corruption of civilization is laid squarely at the feet of one prominent Watcher, Azazel. Azazel is portrayed as the most corrupt of the fallen angels, primarily responsible for revealing forbidden knowledge, the original technological and cultural leak that ruined pre-Diluvian society. Azazel's teachings were dual-pronged, targeting both physical violence and moral degradation. He taught men how to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and revealed the metals of the earth and how to work them. This is the text's origin story for organized warfare and the foundation of what would be recognized today as the military-industrial complex. Simultaneously, Azazel taught vanity, instructing humans in the use of antimony for eyeliner, the making of ornaments and bracelets, the use of precious stones, and various dyes. This knowledge of cosmetics and decoration led directly to widespread wickedness, fornication, and corrupted all their ways. The text details other specialized celestial instructors. Semjaza taught spells and root cutting, Barakijal taught astrology, Kokabial taught constellations. This collective sharing of specialized, dangerous knowledge, a veritable dark arts college, resulted in the proliferation of occult practices and technology that challenged the established natural order. The critical observation here is that Azazel's curriculum demonstrated the corruption of humanity through both physical destruction, weapons technology, and moral dissolution, hypermaterialism, and vanity. This suggests that the text offers a profound critique of technological advancement divorced from spiritual wisdom. The introduction of this specific material culture was antithetical to the divine order, making the flood not a capricious act, but a necessary response to an engineered, existential societal breakdown. The extent of Azazel's specific corruption can be synthesized in the following structure, relating the ancient teachings to modern thematic concerns. The Azazel Protocol, Forbidden Curricula. To counter the celestial corruption introduced by the Watchers, Enoch is presented as a hero associated with scientific material and profound wisdom. Enoch's figure in 1st Enoch is modeled on ancient Near Eastern archetypes, such as the 7th Sumerian king, Enmenderanki, who was also an expert in divinatory arts. Writers of Enochian texts sometimes argued that Enoch's wisdom was either superior to or distinct from that of the Babylonians, suggesting his knowledge was divinely revealed, not empirically derived. This revealed wisdom is most clearly expressed in the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries, 1st Enoch chapter 72 through 82, which displays a meticulous interest in cosmology and systematic observation of the natural world. A presupposition of Enochic thought is that God has established specific laws that the created world obeys without exception. This section functions as a piece of proto-science, attempting to provide schematic basic knowledge, potentially for aspiring priests or others whose work would require some knowledge about the workings of God's creation, especially the ways to measure time. Crucially, the Astronomical book details a specific solar calendar. This 364-day solar system stood in opposition to the lunar calendar used by many contemporary Hebrews, creating a jurisdictional dispute over the official, divinely sanctioned schedule for rituals and holy days. This conflict is highly significant because the ability to measure and dictate time is inextricably linked to political and religious authority. Furthermore, First Enoch utilizes proto-scientific observations to address the complex philosophical problem of Theodicy, the defense of God's goodness in the face of evil. The text offers an alternative explanation for the origin of evil, attributing it to the divine source, the Watchers, while ultimately exonerating God from direct responsibility, thereby challenging the traditional view that evil stemmed solely from Adam's fall. The possession of this celestial knowledge, the superior solar calendar, and the unique explanation for evil was power. Removing the Astronomical book, therefore, allowed the developing religious structures to centralize control over the measurement of time and the definition of sin. The evidence strongly suggests that the exclusion of one Enoch was not accidental, but a calculated act of editorial control centered on what can be termed the astronomical Theodicy blackout. The ban was driven by two intersecting threats posed by the text. One, the calendar threat, logistical control. The 364-day solar calendar described in Enoch is mathematically fixed and consistent. For the priesthoods of the era, the calendar was not merely a schedule, it was the mechanism of their authority. Lunar and lunisolar calendars required complex calculations and adjustments, often necessitated by visual observation, which gave the priesthood immense power over the population through the control of festival dates. The fixed, precise solar calendar of Enoch would have entirely removed the need for priestly judgment in determining the liturgical schedule. This erosion of practical, day-to-day power over the religious life of the community represented a direct threat to the economic and political authority structure of the established religious authorities. 2. The Theodicy conflict, theological simplification. The concept that evil originated with the fallen Watchers contradicts the later centralized doctrine of original sin, rooted solely in Adam and Eve. The early church, aiming for doctrinal unity and simplicity, needed a straightforward explanation for human failure to justify the necessity of a singular messianic redemption. By placing the blame for systemic evil and corruption onto the Watchers, celestial beings who introduced forbidden technology and culture, Enoch diffuses the responsibility away from an inherited human flaw. This complex explanation for evil was inconsistent with the desired theological narrative, which sought to establish the need for redemption via Christ. Because scholars believed the 5 sections of 1 Enoch were originally independent works and were later redacted, the developing canonical structures were able to perform a surgical exclusion. They retained the valuable messianic material, the Son of Man concept used extensively in the Book of Parables, and even referenced the text in the New Testament, Jude, but systematically eliminated the cosmological and Theodicy sections, Watchers and Luminaries, because they posed logistical and theological hurdles. The theory concludes that the ban was not imposed because the book was deemed fraudulent. It was banned because the technical and cosmological information it contained was too potent and too contradictory to the centralized narrative of spiritual and temporal authority being developed. After the Watchers realized their transgression, the appeal to Enoch begging him to mediate with God on their behalf, hoping for forgiveness. Enoch ascended to the heavens, received visions, and returned with the crushing divine verdict. The Watchers could not be forgiven because, unlike humans, they were celestial beings who were explicitly given knowledge of the natural order and should have known better. Divine retaliation was swift and absolute. The Archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel were commanded to intervene. Their mission was multifaceted. They were ordered to destroy the offspring, the Nephilim, and capture the Watchers. Specifically, Azazel, having been identified as the most pernicious corrupter, was selected for final judgment. He was bound and cast into the abyss, a place of punishment. The judgment was so severe that Michael and Raphael were reportedly astonished at the severity of the judgment. This detail emphasizes the unique scale of the Watchers' cosmic crime. Following the successful binding of the rebel angels, Enoch was instructed to inform Noah of the impending deluge, confirming his preservation and the coming renewal of the divine covenant. The binding of Azazel and the Watchers carries significant theological weight. It suggests that the source of the evil and the knowledge they imparted are not annihilated, but merely quarantined in a place of punishment. This explains the lingering residue of evil in the world, the persistence of warfare, sorcery, and vanity. While the original instructors are bound, the cultural instruction remains available, suggesting that humanity continues to suffer not just from inherited sin, but from the residual foundational corruption introduced by the Watchers. To provide a counterbalance to the destructive narrative of the Watchers, 1 Enoch pivots to profound eschatological prophecy, primarily in the Book of Parables, chapters 37 through 71. This section contains detailed visions concerning divine judgment and the coming messianic kingdom. The central figure introduced here is the Son of Man, a heavenly figure referred to as the Elect One. This figure is destined to judge the wicked and establish a righteous kingdom. The text extensively describes the power and wisdom bestowed upon the Elect One, detailing the judgment of the kings and the mighty, the unavailing repentance of the wicked, and the ultimate glorification of the righteous. The prophecies cover the resurrection of the dead and the separation by the judge of the righteous and the wicked. This material proved highly influential in early Christian theology, demonstrating the selective appeal of Enoch's content even among those who ultimately rejected the book's canonical status. This material sets the stage for the conclusion by affirming the eventual return to divine order. The exhaustive analysis confirms that the Book of Enoch serves as a crucial, complex, and inconvenient dataset for understanding not just biblical history, but the origins of systemic chaos, technological corruption, and the complex philosophical problem of theodicy. Reintegrating this banned history reveals that the world's first great crisis was a consequence of a celestial betrayal and subsequent unchecked technological proliferation, rather than a single transgression in a garden. Ignoring or suppressing history, regardless of the motivation, does not eliminate the underlying forces or the lingering cultural effects of the Watcher's original instruction. The most enduring, subtle, and universal principle presented across the 5 parts of 1 Enoch is the absolute nature of divine justice. The fate of the Watchers and the eventual judgment of the Nephilim confirm that power, even celestial, technological, or military power, does not exempt any being from consequences. The text stands as an eternal record that no one gets away with corrupting the creation. The text affirms that ultimate justice prevails, reminding us that despite the chaos and corruption witnessed in the historical record, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Okay, thanks for watching. Peace out. Goodbye, guys.